Madam Speaker, Mika couldn't be with us this hour, and she's sorry to have missed you, but she asked people yesterday to text her questions that they might have for you, and I just wanted to read one off. And a question is a general question, followed by a specific one. Will the House be taking any steps to protect the Republic from the authoritarian actions by the Commander-in-Chief? And will there be legislation that attempts to ban the chokehold, that the sort of chokehold that killed George Floyd?
Yes, to both. Mr. Hakeem Jeffries has legislation about the chokehold specifically. The array of legislation includes any kind of use of violence that stops the flow of blood to the brain, to be specific, yes. And then in terms of the first part of it, what's interesting about that question about the use of the military in our country, when you say military, people sometimes think you mean the reserves or, state keeping order and the rest. So people might say, well, I'm all for that. Yeah, if that's necessary to keep order. But the use of the active military is a completely different subject, and that's almost a constitutional question. Let me just say that when the president was on the call with the governors and he was saying, I have Governor General Milley here, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and he's a warrior and he always wins and he's ready to go and all that, that was so out of place for the President of the United States, but let's not, once again, let's not go there. But the fact is, General Milley he's not in the chain of command. He's an advisor to the President, advisor to the Secretary of Defense, advisor to policymakers, but he is not in the chain of command. He cannot order anyone to do anything. So that was a complete, total misrepresentation, once again, on the part of the President as to how things would work. I think he wanted to show the proximity to the Commander-in-Chief. But we really have to be very cautious. That's why I'm so glad that Adam Smith, Chairman Adam Smith of Washington State, the chair of the Armed Services Committee, has called for General Milley and the Secretary of Defense to come before the committee to have this discussion. This is very important for a democracy. This is very important to the American people, and there has to be a distinction between keeping order on the state, the reserves, et cetera, versus the use of the military that the president seems to be waving out there. Well, let us pray. I always say, as I said yesterday, let us pray. Let us be prayerful about the greatness of America that will overcome some of the challenge we're facing right now. We all support peaceful demonstrations. I'm an organizer. I was chair of the party for years before I came to Congress. So I know that when you have a big event, you know that there are going to be exploiters come in, break windows and the rest, because that's what they do. It's unfortunate, but because then everyone thinks, wow, others can be painted with that brush unfairly. So again, it is not honoring the memory of George Floyd, as his brother so eloquently said. And hasn't the family just been so beautiful and so inspiring to all of us to mourn the loss of their loved one who was killed so unnecessarily, whose name is making the difference. It's pivotal in terms of making differences and making a change, and that people all over the world are turning out in his name. But as you said earlier, the issue is larger than that one incident, because that was not one incident. It was part of a pattern and then part of a larger set of injustices that exist in our country that we must address, and that much of it is contained in the HEROES Act that we can do right away in helping in terms of health and the lives, the livelihood, and the life of our democracy.
And finally, I know that you're a person of great faith. We've talked about it, of course, off TV a good bit. And you've talked about it some on. So talk about your faith, if you will, in America, that we're going to get through this, that you look at the numbers, the poll numbers during the coronavirus outbreak. Actually, most Americans were responsible. Most Americans, Republican, Democratic, Independent, alike, good people that protected their families, sheltered in place, bent the curve. And we see the same thing with numbers that have come out. The overwhelming majority of Americans support the protesters in the street. Talk about how Americans should not be in despair, that Americans should look at these numbers and see that we really are a lot more united than perhaps some politicians would want us to be. And that includes Republicans, Independents, and Democrats that you work with every day.
That's right. Well, I appreciate your focus on faith, because I do believe, sometimes people say to me, where is hope? Where can I go find hope? And I say hope is sitting there where it always has been, right between faith and charity. Faith, hope, and charity. Faith gives people hope in the goodness of others. And so it's very important. Now, faith is a gift. Not everyone has it. Sometimes people say to me, how come you believe this or that? I say, well, I have the gift of faith. And that gift of faith tells us that we're all God's children, that we're made in the image and likeness of God, and there's a spark of divinity in every person that we have to respect, including in ourselves, that we have to act upon. So again, so many things that have happened in our country, whether it's the civil rights movement, whether it was living through slavery and the rest of that, have depended on faith as giving them hope because of love, that they're hopeful is out there. And that is, I think, what people want to see. They don't want the negativity. They want something positive about how we go forward together. Now, not everybody is of the same mind, and we have to be respectful of those differences of opinion. But if we have these values, we have to act upon them. And the one thing that I miss through all of this, of course, is hugging my grandchildren, but also going to church, because I just love going to church. And when Father said, you don't have to come, we don't want you to come, because this was early on. I said, well, no, I want to come. This is such an inspiration for all of us. So whatever faith people have, it doesn't, I happen to be a devout practicing Catholic. Whatever their faith, it is predicated on the goodness of people, and that's something that we believe in, and that gives us hope.
All right, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate you being here. All right, thank you so much, and God bless you. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.